This week in On the Go, Adelee Le Grand, leader of the Hillsborough Transit Authority, and her mission to both customers and employees at HART.
We have to be transparent so people understand where we are today, where we want to go, and what we need to do to get there.
Hello and welcome to On the Go, the T-BARTA podcast, where we discuss the latest in transit and transportation all across Tampa Bay. I'm your host, Chris Chaddock, and today we have a special guest, Adelee Le Grand, CEO of the Hillsborough Transit Authority. Adelee, thanks for making time to join us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Adelee Le Grand joined HART about a year ago, bringing with her more than 3 decades of transit industry experience, including as a member of the executive team for 2 transit agencies. Prior to joining HART, she served as the Chief Mobility Officer for the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority and also Chief Strategy Officer for the New Orleans Regional Transit Authority. Adelee, I often like to start these conversations by asking people why they do what they do. So let's start there. Why did you decide to make transit your career?
So that's a great question. Of course, it's not the first time I've been asked this. And I went to college. I'm one of the rare people who went to school to do exactly what I'm currently doing. So I do have a degree in transportation. I have an undergraduate degree in industrial engineering, which is really about process efficiencies. And it's something that I was always interested in. And I got a master's in transportation because, as you can imagine, there are lots of opportunities to make transportation more efficient. In transportation studies, you look at all the modes, but my sweet spot has been transit for the last 2 decades, even though I did spend some time in logistics. And I really like engaging with the community and the public and seeing how we can make the service better for them and allowing people to have better access to places that are important to them. So that's what's landed me here, and it's kept me here for all this time.
Well, we appreciate having you here in Tampa Bay. We certainly do need your expertise. I gave a very brief overview of your background, but I know there's much more. Can you tell us a little bit more about your career journey that led you into leadership roles in transit?
So, I started off, as I stated, in this space right out of college, and I'm originally from New York, Queens, New York, for any New Yorkers who are listening. And, I used transit growing up. As one could imagine, being from New York City, I took the train and the bus pretty much every day to get around. And when you use a service and you don't really think about how it's actually managed or implemented, but you just know it's there, it's kind of like turning on the faucet, right? The expectation is water's going to come out and you can fill up your cup. And you don't really think about all of the steps that goes into allowing you to turn on that faucet and then consuming that water. And then for me, once I got into the space in transit and started engaging with the public, started off, of course, as a planner and went to public meetings and just started listening to people and being able to understand what people were asking, as well as what people didn't know how to articulate that they wanted. And for me, it was really about that, if you will, mashup, right, between what you're hearing and what you're not hearing, and the bridge that you have to build in order to really bring to the community the solutions that they need. And for me, it's always been about solving problems, working with a large team of folks to really come up with the best solutions that are sustainable and cost effective, and then gaining the community's respect. So, I didn't start off in this space thinking about being a leader in transit. So your specific question was, what was my journey to be in leadership roles within transit? But it was more about what's the next big challenge for me. And through that, and tackling bigger challenges and bigger projects, you end up leading teams that are all focused on finding solutions. So for me, it's always been finding the next big challenge and putting a team together to really change that challenge into an opportunity and then bring success to communities.
As mentioned, you've been at HART for about a year, and there's a lot of responsibility there. So for those who are not familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about the Transit Authority, how big it is, how many employees you have, how much transit you do, things like that?
Sure. So HART, we have an organization of approximately 800 people, and we provide transit service throughout Hillsborough County. That's what our charter allows us to do. sans Plant City. So there's one city that we are not in our charter have permission to provide service in currently, but that's not going to stop us from trying to engage with that leadership as well. And we provide bus service, paratransit service, as well as streetcar service throughout the county. We have approximately 40 bus routes right now. And as you can imagine with COVID, we're not providing as much service as we would like, but we had to scale it back to meet the community's demand. So we are seeing an uptick in ridership, and that's great. And then we'll also be looking at providing additional service to support the increased demand. I would say overall, what we're really focused on is providing reliable service. And that means that, if you go out to a bus stop or a streetcar station and you have a schedule, or you're looking at our real-time information on an app, and it says your vehicle is going to arrive in 2 minutes, we want that to actually happen. And we want that to happen in, the vast majority of the cases, so that you can depend on us. And that's really what we're focused on, making sure that we have reliable service and that you can depend on us to get you where you need to go.
And no doubt when you interviewed for this position, you were asked your transit philosophy or something similar on what a transit authority should be and what you would do to strive and make HART, as CEO, that vision. Can you talk about your vision, which may be coming better into focus now that you've been 1 year into the job?
When I started with the interview process, which is approximately a year ago to date, I would say, it was really about, and this is before you get in, right? So it's kind of like before the honeymoon period, it's more of the preparation for the actual big event. And you have all these great ideas, and then the party is over and you have to go to work. And that's pretty much where I've been for the last year. When I came in, I said what was important to me is to have a transparent organization where we're gaining the trust and respect of our internal and external community, and then providing reliable, cost-effective service. I would say, even though it's been a little less than a year, those are still the focus for us here at HART. We have to be transparent so people understand where we are today, where we want to go, and what we need to do to get there. We have to gain the trust and respect of the community so that they know when we tell them something, good or bad, that it's the truth, and that they can rely on what we're telling them as far as our way forward. And we have to, as I stated, provide reliable service, because at the end of the day, we're in the business of providing great service. And if we're not doing that, we're not doing our job. And I would say if you take all three of those items and roll them all together into one phrase, I would say it's providing excellent customer experience. And that's really what we're focused on doing. And I would say, almost a year in, that is still what we're focused on doing, which is providing excellent customer experience. And that's internal and external. The folks who work here are customers, and we have to treat them with respect, be transparent. There's a lot of change going on. You don't want to wake up and read something in the paper about what's going on in your organization. You want to hear about it firsthand. And we have to treat our folks with respect. They're dealing with a whole lot, just like the rest of the world. And then in turn, if you have employees who feel great about where they work and how they're treated, they will also treat the customers the same way. So it's definitely an internal and external approach to improving our customer experience.
And extending on that, can you outline your priorities, including your near-term goals as well as some of your long-term vision?
It's really one to focus on our on-time performance. And that's the way you can really, hold yourself accountable as far as being reliable. So you can say you want to provide reliable service, but if your on-time performance is 50%, well, then just basic math, every other time you're not there. So that's one, ensuring that we have the mechanisms in place so that we can track every one of our routes, which I said are approximately 40 of them, and have a plan in place to make sure we understand where we have challenges, and then putting solutions in place so that we can overcome those challenges. I would say that's number one. Two is really understanding who we are in the business that we're in. Sometimes you wake up and you go to a job and you say, I work at such and such place, but that's all it means. You don't know what that place stands for. You don't really understand your role in getting that place to its vision, to implementing the vision. So for me, it was very important that we spent the last year internally having conversations with everyone in the organization about the vision for HART and making sure that we all understood why we're doing what we're doing and what our vision is, and then what's everybody's role in helping us to accomplish that vision. And we have completed that phase of our process. I'm happy to say that we had several meetings, months of meetings from June through the end of October. And we worked across every functional area in the organization, from bus washers to bus mechanics to bus operators to supervisors to accounting folks to procurement folks, everybody in the organization to be a part of this conversation about our vision. And one would think, you get one little sentence, the fact that it took so many months to gain consensus around what we want to do. But in summary, our vision is to be the highest customer ranked transit agency in the Tampa Bay region. And the reason why it's really focused on customer ranking is because we feel if the community ranks us as the best mobility provider in the region, then we're doing a great job. Our on-time performance is hitting all the marks. Our customer experience is high. And just like J.D. Powers ranks different organizations, we want to be ranked by our users and our community to say that we're the best at providing mobility service. So that's where we landed. This came out of several engagements with the staff. We presented it to the board, and our next steps are really to develop goals and objectives to help us implement that new vision. I would say that has definitely been one of our priorities.
Excellent. Thank you. It's a well thought out process for sure. Whenever someone steps into a new role at a new agency, there are a lot of unknowns. What do you know now, either at HART or perhaps here in Tampa Bay, that you didn't expect when you accepted this position?
That is a great question. I did know that HART had gone through several leadership changes over the last couple of years since 2018. I believe inclusive of myself, there were 6 different CEOs at the organization. So I did know that. What I didn't know is that because of those changes, there was so much uncertainty within the organization from staff, really feeling comfortable that we're going to move forward with a new leader who's going to be here for a while, right? So it's kind of like you get brought into a new family and you think everything is good, and then you get pulled out of the family and you move into another home and you move into another home. And we've heard this story, right? When you talk about foster care and our other services, where we're like, it's very disruptive and folks can't really be as successful as they would want to be because there's so many changes. Well, think about that now in an organization with 800 people, and they're constantly getting new leaders. There isn't clear direction. You don't know where you're going next. You don't even know if you should invest the time to really engage fully and accept or even sign up for moving in a direction. Because if you invest in it and you put all of your energy into it, and then in 6 months or 9 months or a year, it's changing completely after the first time or the second time or the third time. But 5 times into this, you're like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm going to show up, do what I have to do, keep my head down and keep moving forward. So what I did not expect was how disruptive those changes have been. And the fact that the team needed some time, just like joining a new family, to get to know their new leader and get to build trust and get to, I would say, feel me out. Is she really going to stay? I hate to sound like an after school special, but we've seen these. The new person in the family, they're disruptive, or they do this, or you always have to sit down and have conversations. You're like, what's going on? And you learn that it's just that they're afraid to commit fully because they don't want to be let down. And at the end of the day, that's what we have here at the organization, because folks have been let down by no fault of their own. They've been let down for several years, and it should be expected that it'll take some time. It's taken a little longer for me to get where I wanted to go, but I think that the time we've taken to get here was time well spent, because people are now really a part of the process and they really understand where I'd like to take us. And I've been able to put my money where my mouth is, right? So we are able to move projects forward that have been sitting on the books for years, over a decade. And we've been able to pull that off in, one calendar year. So, now folks, I believe you'd have to do your own survey, but I believe they're starting to see that I'm here for, at a minimum, the duration of my current contract. And I really focused on leaving them with the skills and the access to resources so that they can be the highest performing team possible.
Now, it sounds like you're laying a very solid foundation. I'm sure the staff appreciates that approach. Nationwide, transit has been greatly impacted by the COVID pandemic. What we provide is essential to so many, so operations needed to continue. Yet the lockdown hit our industry very hard. HARTs did an outstanding job keeping transit going while implementing new safety procedures to keep both riders and your employees as safe as possible. Do you think the pandemic will have a lasting impact on the transit industry? And if so, how will things be different in the years ahead?
That is a question that's being asked all over the world, not just in the United States. And I would say the short answer is yes, the pandemic has changed the face of transit. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Before the pandemic, you didn't see as many, at least, industry wise. I don't know what was actually happening here in Tampa, but industry wide, there weren't as many people who were using scooters or riding bicycles, just using other modes of transportation, even inline skates. Those have made a comeback, which is kind of interesting to me, but nonetheless. So you're seeing all sorts of folks using other ways to move around that we didn't really see before. So that's one. Two, more people are working from home. So their commute pattern is different. They still get out and they still want to move about, but it's not the traditional 9 to 5 peak period commute pattern. So what that means is that for the most part, transit has been designed to get people from home to work and from work back to home. Since COVID, we see that there are a lot of trips that are happening between those times, either after the time, the AM peak rush, and people may be going out for lunch because they've been inside working from home all day. They want to get out and they want to go someplace to grab lunch, or after work, they want to go out and do some other things. So it's expanding the time period that people want to be out and moving around. And it's now creating the opportunity for transit agencies to provide service outside of the traditional peak period commute type of pattern. How is that going to manifest itself in the future? We don't really know. We're still tracking it, but some of the big investments that people were really relying on to advance public transit is not really showing that you have the ridership there that you're really looking for. So for example, you may see systems that have commuter rail or other modes that are really focused on getting people to work from home and back during the traditional period of time. That need is really not there any longer. That level of demand isn't there. In a lot of cases, that type of transit costs more than just providing local bus service. So that's something that we're trying to really wrap our hands around to figure out, how do we manage that and what is it going to look like? So that's one. Two, we are seeing more people coming back to work. There is really the push that companies want to see people want to be around other people, but probably not 5 days a week. So maybe it's 2 days a week, 1 week, 3 days a week, another week. Again, having to understand what that balance looks like and how it impacts our ridership overall is something that we're trying to wrap our hands around. But what I would say is the good news is that in a city like Tampa and a county like Hillsborough County, there's so many great places that people want to go to, and there's so many activity centers that we can work with the community and provide the right level of service to allow people to still move around the way they like. And using technology, hopefully we'll get to a place where we don't have to only rely on a fixed route schedule, which means it's very prescriptive, it's coming on this day at this time at this frequency, to going into more dynamic routing. So it's more of, hey, I decided I want to go, I don't know, to a show, and I'm going to look on the app and see what's available for me. And you can start, I would say, scheduling some of your trips in a more dynamic way. So that's something that we're also looking at and entertaining to see if we can introduce to the community.
We've been hearing recently a lot about the need to replace HART's heavy duty maintenance facility. Commissioner Pat Kemp called that a dire emergency, and I think you would agree. Can you tell us what's happening there and why that's so important to address right now?
Well, that is a great question. And Pat Kemp, as well as the county commissioners, 6 of them were actually at the meeting where they voted to support our heavy maintenance facility, as well as the HART Board of Directors. The reality is our heavy maintenance facility has reached its useful life. It's been there for a very long time, and it is beyond a state of good repair. It's not ADA compliant. It doesn't accommodate the existing fleet that we have, and it definitely won't be able to accommodate a larger fleet, which we'll need in order to expand our service. As I stated, we've reduced service because of COVID, but as we see an increase in demand, we're going to also have to provide more vehicles to provide more service. We need a new facility that'll allow us to do those things. Plus, to add more to the mix, we want to transition from our diesel fleet to CNG, and then from CNG to electric. So we did receive a grant with a partnership with TECO, and we're getting ready to move forward with purchasing at least 3 electric vehicles. In order to bring those online as well, we have to have a facility where we can maintain those electric vehicles as well. It took a lot of work, and I would say this is another example of Tampa Bay collaboration, but working with FDOT, Mingao and his team, as well as the TPO, Beth Alden and her team, the county administrator, Bonnie Wise and her team, Mayor Castor and her team, and the HART Board of Directors. We were all able to sit around, I would say, the proverbial table and figure out opportunities that existed to reallocate some funds that already existed, as well as going after federal grant opportunities to bridge the gap. So through this collaborative process, we were able to work with FDOT and had some funds reallocated to the heavy maintenance facility, funds that were already slated toward coming to HART, but now we're going to purpose them for the heavy maintenance facility of approximately $25 million. Those funds required a local match. So the county and the county board, they voted, I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago, to award up to $15 million of local matching dollars for the local match to the FDOT funds. And the remaining funds that would get us to the 25 million will be a combination of HART dollars as well as the city of Tampa dollars. So that gets us to $50 million. And then the TPO was also willing, through a TIP amendment process, to reallocate some work program dollars from bus improvements to this heavy maintenance facility of approximately $25 million. So overall, we were able to piecemeal together $75 million to move the project forward. And we did submit a grant application to the Federal Transit Administration for the $25 million that's remaining to finish the project. We are excited about this opportunity. With the $75 million, we can start moving forward with the project, and we are very confident that we'll be able to bridge the gap with some other grant dollars.
Well, that's an excellent example of what's possible when we collaborate and cooperate together. So thanks for sharing the details on that. And that leads us to the overall question of transit funding. It's well documented that when it comes to transit funding, the Tampa Bay area spends less than most other urban areas. Tampa Bay's other major transit provider, the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, also struggles with this. In your role, you are Hillsborough County's #1 advocate for public transit. So how do you characterize our funding needs and persuade those that public transit is worthy of a greater investment?
I definitely advocate for spending more money with transit, but me saying it is not going to get us more money. And me just going around and telling people it's a good thing to do, it's not going to get us more supporters. What we have to do is provide top-notch service. We have to create an experience that is the best experience ever. And it can't be the shot in the dark. If you've never ridden transit, the first time you ride it, it has to be an excellent experience, or else you're not going to ride it again. So it's my job, back to I think maybe the first or second question, is to make sure that we provide reliable service and we provide an excellent customer experience. And through those experiences, people will be able to say, well, I did ride HART to go to a hockey game and it was great. Or I did ride HART to go and visit someone who just had a baby in the hospital because I didn't want to park. And it was a great experience. Or I rode HART for my first day at work and I got there on time. So those are the stories that we need to be able to tell. And then the service needs to sell itself. And I know that sounds hokey and it takes more than that, but think about most services that you have. If you bought a new pair of jeans and as soon as you sat down, the seam rips, you're not buying those jeans again, right? But if you had a great experience and you're like, wow, this really was a great fit, I really like this cut, the odds are you'll continue with that brand. And HART needs to be seen as a mobility brand that people can choose. And if you have a great experience, you're going to choose to come back again. So that's really what I would say is the best way to gain support is by making sure you're providing really, really top-notch quality service.
Now, you've worked in other urban areas which have made greater transit investments. I'm wondering if there are cultural or historical reasons why other areas approach transit a little bit differently. In your brief time here, do you have any observations to share on why Tampa Bay relies so much on single occupancy vehicles as opposed to more mass transit?
Well, for the most part, there's this misnomer that there are these magical cities that have a lot of people riding transit. They don't really exist. You may have a couple of, say, legacy transit cities like a New York City, Boston, DC, which is not super, super old, but still the way the system was designed, you'll have more ridership on transit than in some other cities. But for the most part, the transit mode split, which means the number of people who actually ride transit versus those who drive in their own cars, is less than 10%. So less than 10% of the communities nationwide are actually riding transit, especially outside of that AM and PM peak period. So even major cities like Washington, DC, Chicago, that's a legacy system as well. But you'll see those ridership numbers tend to dial back on the weekend because people are then getting in their car and moving about in their own transportation. So in the South, where I spent a lot of the majority of my professional career, it's not uncommon, even in a city like Atlanta, it's not uncommon that most people drive where they need to go. What I would say is different is that now you do see a greater focus on climate change, but again, more people are buying electric vehicles. You can now check the box, I'm doing great for the environment, but I'm still not riding transit. You also have a group of folks who are open to using other modes of transportation instead of just being in a vehicle by themselves. So what I would say is that it's less about the Tampa Bay area. It's more about the level of quality service we're providing. If it's kind of like taking a test, trying to figure out how you ride transit, people are going to opt out. If it's simple and easy to do and easy to navigate, people will be more willing to try it out. And that's what we need to do. We need to make it an easier to use type of mode. So for example, if you want to get in your car and go someplace, you know where your car is parked, you just go in it and you start the car up. If you have a navigator, you might put it in Waze and say, I want to go here, and boom, you're there. To ride transit, you have to have the app. If you didn't know you need to have an app, you have to go on a website and call the transit agency. And then somebody is telling you there's an app, and then you have to figure out how to do it. There's a lot of work that it takes before you actually get to use it if you've never used it before. If you're someone who has used it before, you know where your bus stop is, but routes change and schedules change. So then you get frustrated. So those are all the things that we need to do to fix the process, and we can. So with real-time information, we can focus on making sure every bus stop or entry point to the system has real-time information. So if you walk up to a stop, which was always your community stop, but the schedule has changed, you should be able to touch a screen and say, okay, I'm here, I want to go there. What time does the bus come? What do I need to do? And it's right there for you. You don't have to have some sort of syllabus to understand how to navigate transit. And that's really where we need to move, making our stations, our bus stops, our shelters, providing the technology to make it easier for people to use our system, as well as how much does it cost to ride? That's another thing. Yes, If you drive your own car, you have to pay your car note, you have to pay the maintenance, you have to pay for the fuel. But typically, you're not concerned when you get behind the wheel with how much does it cost to do all those things. If you never used transit before, you're thinking, well, how much does it cost? How do I pay? Do I have to use cash? Can I use a card? All of those questions we have to address and make it easy for people so that they are not spending all this time doing research instead of just having a great experience. So again, that's something else that we're working on.
Well, as we've already touched on a little bit, technology is rapidly changing the way we move, and I know HART is at the forefront of that. You talked about alternative energy vehicles a little bit, but let's get into that a little bit more. There are many different technologies, and for many of us, electric comes to mind first because we see the EVs, such as Tesla, out there getting a lot of attention these days. But in mass transit, there's natural gas, biodiesel, other alternatives. Where does the industry stand on alternative energy development? And specifically, you talked a little bit about this, the direction that HART is going to go when it comes to those vehicles.
Yes, so HART does have a fleet plan, and our plan has by 2035, we would like to transition to an all-electric fleet. Right now, we do have clean diesel, CNG vehicles as well. And as I mentioned, we were just received a grant with a partnership with TICO to allow us to purchase up to 3 electric vehicles. What does the future hold? I do not know. Chris, I wish I could tell you that I know we're going to have a full stop at electric. I don't think that's what it's going to be. There's some transit agencies out west that are using hydrogen cells for energy sources for their vehicles. And we also want to have some redundancy. You really don't want to have an entire fleet of one source, because if there's anything in a system that goes down, so for example, it's not unheard of to have power outage if the grid is overloaded. Imagine if that were to happen, let's say during a hurricane, and all of our vehicles were electric, and as soon as the charges were out of our batteries, we wouldn't be able to move people. So we don't want that. So we really have to look at a plan of having some redundancy in there, but then transitioning fully to a cleaner energy source so that we're being mindful of our environment.
I guess you would say the days of the diesel powered bus are numbered. Do you see it fully being retired in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Our plan and our fleet replacement plan is to really get rid of diesel first and foremost. So over the next 5 years, we're looking to have no more diesel in our fleet.
Very good. Well, automation is another technology that is changing transit. Can you talk a little bit more about BEEP? That's the autonomous vehicle testing now underway. What is the purpose of that? And do you see a day when HART's mass transit vehicles don't have a driver?
So we do have BEEP, and it's operating right now between Armature Works and the Strauss Center. We kicked that off right the week of Thanksgiving. And the purpose of it is really for us to determine how well a vehicle like BEEP can operate in mixed traffic. So we did have a pilot in the Marion Transit Way, but that was a closed network because there aren't vehicles operating in that transit way. So this is a different alignment. So we actually have cars in that same alignment that the BEEP has to interact with. So it gives us some data on how responsive the vehicle is, any challenges that we do see, so that we can at least have data to support what such a technology would look like in full operation. Now, do I envision a day where we don't have any bus operators? I would say no, I don't envision that day. I do see that there will be a day when we have more autonomous vehicles that have technology that will help us to have safer systems. So the technology, for example, in BEEP, if something comes within the boundaries of the vehicle will stop. If there seems like someone just jumps in front of the vehicle, again, it would stop. It won't allow the vehicle to turn in front of some sort of obstacle. All of that technology would be very helpful for transit agencies so that we can provide very safe service. But even with BEEP, there is someone who's on the vehicle. So it's not like you just get in the BEEP and there's nobody there to be responsible for the vehicle. And I don't see that ever being a day, at least in my career, where you'll get on a vehicle and there'll be nobody there to actually, manage what is going on. And I give this example, it's like autopilot. So most of the time when a pilot is flying a plane, it's on autopilot, but we'll never have a day where there's no pilot, right? It's not going to be a day like someone in central control pushes the button and says plane go, and everyone is sitting in front of a computer screen, making sure the planes are taking off and landing them from their computer. The community wouldn't be happy with that, and they would like to see someone sitting in the seats. And I believe that would be the same approach for transit. However, the technology will evolve to make it so that those operators are really more focused on the customer experience than in actually driving the vehicles.
Well, we've talked a lot about projects you're working on, and I know there are many more, probably have just scratched the surface. While we have time, are there any other projects I may have not asked you about that you want to make sure our listeners are aware of, and so they know what HART's doing?
Sure. One that I will share is that we are focused on ensuring that all of our bus stops are ADA compliant and making sure that wherever the infrastructure permits, that we have shelters and benches available for our community. Goes back to the whole customer experience point. If the customer has to wait in inclement weather without a cover, if they have to wait for a longer duration of time without a seat, it doesn't lend itself to a great experience. So what we really want to do is system-wide, we have approximately 2,500 stops. We're going through and really cataloging where we need to upgrade our shelters, where do we need to work with the Department of Public Works to be able to put benches and shelters in locations that we don't have them, working collectively with our partners to ensure that there's sidewalks and curb cuts so people can access our points of entry with as minimal, I would say, challenge as possible. And then also bringing in real-time information with technology. So that is, I would say, our second priority outside of the heavy maintenance facility, just making sure that we're creating the best environment for our customers as they're waiting to board and to alight or get off of our vehicles.
Now, when we talk about transit authorities, people most often think buses, but transit is not just that. HART is now overseeing the ferry service between Pinellas and Hillsborough counties, and there are visions of that growing in the years ahead. What potential do you see for ferry service here, and how does that fit in with traditional operations at a transit authority?
So, that's a good point as far as transit is not just bus, but transit is bus. And I do want to say that the bare bones of any transit system is the bus service. It's kind of like baking a cake. If you put in salt instead of sugar, it doesn't matter what you add to the rest of the batter, it's going to be terrible. So if our transit system is the salt in the cake batter, our bus system is the salt in the cake batter, it doesn't matter what additional modes we add to our service, it's not going to be a great experience. So what I would say is that our primary focus, at least under my leadership, is to ensure that our bus service is top notch. And then once we do that, we can definitely add on additional services. Like we have the streetcar, which is a plan to extend the streetcar. There are plans to look at BRT service. There are conversations, this well, being with T-BARTA, to look at regional investments that we can also bring into the community. And then, as you mentioned, the ferry service. We do have water here. So what are the opportunities to expand on what's going on today? And then maybe even connecting closer with the water taxi service, so that the whole process can be bundled together again with one experience. So these are some of the things that we're thinking about, but I would hate for this podcast to end with the community thinking that our focus is looking at other modes. Our primary focus is to ensure that we're providing the best bus service possible. And then from that, building on to our system, kind of like Voltron. So we have the body and we have to put the head on, but we haven't done that yet.
Very good analogy. Very good. Before we go, I want to address the employment opportunities you have at HART. Your agency is not alone. All transit agencies in the 5-county T-BARTA region are in urgent need of bus transit operators. What are some of the opportunities now at HART, and what type of people are you looking for?
We have needs across every area in the organization for great people to join our organization. The types of people we're looking for are people who enjoy working in a community setting, enjoy engaging with the community, and then understanding the value that public transit has in people's lives. And I will share this. There are some people who may be, I don't want to say disabled, but differently abled. There are things that they can do, but public transit allows them to do a lot more than they would be able to do if they didn't have access to public transit. That's the space that we're in. There are folks who don't have driver's license because maybe they're too young, but they have opportunities to go to a school across town or take a music class after school because they really love playing the viola and they want to go to the Strauss Center after school to take some lessons. This is the space that you will be in working in transit, helping people who are doctors and nurses who work at hospitals to be able to not have to drive a car, or everybody has felt the pinch of the pandemic. You can get rid of a car so you can have a little more money in your household. And now you commute 3 days a week while your partner has the car, and then you swap. We're providing opportunities for people to do a lot more with their lives, and we need people who understand the value that we're bringing to the community. And this is what I would say, it is my job to elevate the brand of the bus operator. They are doing a whole lot. I tell people this, it's kind of like when you're waiting for a flight and you see the pilot and the flight crew walk through and you're sitting at the gate, you kind of look up and you have this sense of, yes, I'm in good hands, they look professional, and you respect them. But the pilot gets on and they close that little door and you never see them. So passengers who don't like their seat or have a problem or have a question, they are not asking the pilot any of those questions. And the pilot's job is just to get you there on time, safely. And again, remember, over 90% of the trip is on autopilot. So we don't really know what they're doing in there. For a bus driver, they have to drive the vehicle. They have to stop at every stop. They have to answer your questions. They have to remind you that you're getting off. And they need to be respected in a way that I don't think the community respects them. So it's my job also to elevate the brand. And we're looking for bus operators who understand that they will be respected here, that we understand that they're under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. Not everybody's having a good day. So even though the customers might not be having a good day, it's your job to ensure that you're not adding to their bad day. And we recognize that. So this is definitely an organization who understands what the job entails. And we're here to support our operators as well as all of our employees here at HART, and create an environment where you can be successful and grow in your career. You can start off as a bus operator, you can retire as a bus operator, but you can also move into other aspects within the organization. It's all up to you what you want to do, and we'll provide you with the training that you need to be able to do that.
And I want to end on this one. I'm sure you want to expound on why HART is a great place to work right now. Tell me why somebody might want to make their next career move to the Hillsborough Transit Authority.
So this is what I'll say. We're one heart, many beats. And if you want to be a part of this heartbeat, come on over here. Now, I know that was hokey, but it's the truth. You know, we have all sorts of people here during a time where people are talking about equity and diversity and inclusion. And this is a place where no matter where you walk up and down the halls, you'll see all sorts of people represented. Everybody's accepted. It's not a place where you'll feel like you have to hide who you are. You can bring your full self to work and you'll have a great time, and we do good work. So I would say come to HART, and we're in Tampa Bay. So why not? Like, where else do you want to be? That would be my answer.
That's a great pitch. Certainly is a great pitch. Adelee, thank you for spending a few minutes with us today. We do agree transit opens doors for so many people, providing connections they otherwise would not have. And it's fundamental to the future of a vibrant and progressive community such as we are here. And for those listening, thank you for stopping by. I'm Chris Jadek, and you've been listening to On the Go, the podcast from the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority.